It always starts with something small. A sound you barely notice, a moment so ordinary it doesn't even register until everything after it explodes into chaos. For me, it was the scrape of gravel under heavy footsteps on a quiet Tuesday morning. I had just finished unpacking the last of my grandfather's boxes, the smell of cardboard and dust mixing with the fresh pine-scented air drifting in from the lake. My grandfather's house had been empty for nearly 2 years. Sitting patiently on the edge of that shimmering water like it was waiting for me to come home, I thought I was here for peace, for fishing at dawn and long afternoons paddling across mirrored water. I thought I had escaped the noise and nonsense of city living. But when I heard those footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crunching closer and closer, I had no idea I was about to step into a war. She appeared at my door like she owned the place. Paula Whitman, clipboard pressed tight against her chest, lips pulled into a smile that looked more like a warning than a greeting. She didn't even knock the way normal people knock. It was a sharp, repetitive banging that rattled the glass pane in my grandfather's old wooden door, like she was the sheriff serving papers. When I opened it, she tilted her head, eyes sharp behind oversized sunglasses, and said in a tone rehearsed 1,000 times, "Welcome to our little community. I'm the president of the Lake HOA." The way she said it, Lake HOA, was as if those 3 letters were supposed to make me bow down, as if her title carried divine authority over every blade of grass within shouting distance of the water. I tried to be polite. I really did. I'd been in the house less than a week, still living out of half-unpacked boxes, surviving on instant coffee and the memory of my grandfather's fried catfish recipes. I wasn't ready for neighborhood politics. But Paula wasn't here for small talk. She shoved the clipboard into my chest, tapping her manicured finger against the top page where bold numbers glared back at me. $150 monthly fee. $200 initiation fee. Contract required. "I appreciate you stopping by," I said carefully, handing it back. "But I'm not interested in joining any HOA. This is my family's property. I'm good." The smile cracked instantly. Her shoulders squared, her jaw tightened, and suddenly she wasn't a friendly neighbor welcoming me to the lakeside. She was a warden, a prosecutor, an executioner, all wrapped into one. "Nobody lives on this lake without joining the HOA," she snapped, her voice rising until it bounced off the water behind me. "This is a community resource. Everyone who benefits pays their fair share." "Community resource," I repeated, my confusion genuine. "Ma'am, this lake came with the deed. I've been paying taxes on it since I inherited it." That's when her face shifted from irritation to full-blown hostility. Her voice climbed an octave, sharp enough to scare birds from the trees. "You clearly don't understand how property rights work around here. Every step you take onto that dock is trespassing. If you don't pay, you don't belong." And then, before I could process what she was saying, before I could even laugh at the absurdity of being accused of trespassing on my own dock, Paula pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Right there, on my porch. My stomach dropped, my hands froze. I just stood there, watching her with open disbelief as she calmly told the dispatcher she was reporting a hostile trespasser refusing to comply with community regulations, who calls the cops over a clipboard. The squad car rolled up 20 minutes later, tires crunching on the gravel like a funeral drumbeat. Officer Owen Bennett stepped out, late 40s, the kind of man whose patience looked worn thin by years of mediating barking dog complaints and noisy lawnmower disputes. His eyes flicked between me and Paula as she launched into her speech, waving her arms toward the water like I'd built a pirate ship out there and was charging admission. "Is using community property without authorization," she said, practically foaming at the mouth. "He refuses to pay fees, refuses to sign agreements. He's stealing from everyone here." I looked at Bennett, trying to find the words. "Officer, this is my property. I inherited it. I pay taxes on it. She's accusing me of trespassing on land I legally own." He sighed, scribbled something in his notepad, then snapped it shut. "This sounds like something you two need to resolve through civil channels, not criminal ones." Translation: "Not my circus, not my monkeys." Paula's face flushed red, but Bennett wasn't sticking around for the show. He turned, walked back to his car, and left us standing there. Her glare burned into me, the kind of look that promised she wasn't done, not even close. That night, I sat on the edge of the dock, staring out at the orange buoys I'd placed earlier that week, bright markers bobbing gently where my grandfather had always said the property line stretched. I wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding, a neighbor with too much time on her hands. But the way she'd called the cops, the way she talked like she owned the lake, made something in my gut twist tight. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a battle. The next morning, the flyers appeared. Urgent community notice. Unauthorized lake usage by new resident, printed in bold red letters. My face grainy snapped without my knowledge plastered across them. They were taped to streetlights, pinned to bulletin boards, tucked under windshield wipers in the grocery store parking lot. I stood frozen at the corner of my street, staring at one until the words blurred. By noon, the neighborhood group text I didn't remember joining was exploding with messages. Some confused, some hostile, many questioning how I could be so selfish as to steal from the community. By sunset, People I'd never met were slowing their cars to glare at me, their eyes sharp, their smiles forced. The woman across the street shook her head as she watered her roses. A man walking his dog made a point of crossing to the other side. It was like I had become a criminal overnight, and Paula, she was just getting started. By Friday morning, the atmosphere around the lake had shifted. It wasn't just tension anymore, it was surveillance. Every time I stepped outside, eyes tracked me from behind curtains. Neighbors I'd never spoken to lingered in their driveways when I checked the mail. One even pulled out his phone and started filming me as I walked down to the dock, as if I were some rare animal on display at a zoo. The isolation was suffocating, and that was exactly how Paula wanted it. I started to notice new things, but unsettling. Bright orange flags appeared in my yard one morning, planted neatly in rows across the grass leading down to the water. At first I thought it was some mistake by county surveyors, but when I called the office they told me no one had scheduled work in my area. Someone had been in my yard deliberately, leaving markers like breadcrumbs, designed to confuse me or unsettle me. By Saturday, a group of neighbors gathered in front of my dock with handmade signs that read "Fair fees for all" and "Community water equals community rights." I watched from the kitchen window as Paula orchestrated the whole thing, snapping photos at every angle, making sure to catch the lake in the background and my house looming behind them. She was building a case not for court, but for perception. If enough people believed her story, truth wouldn't matter. That night, my phone lit up with anonymous emails, official-sounding messages about violations, referencing county codes I'd never heard of. Words like encroachment and unauthorized usage filled my inbox, each one framed to sound like it came from some authority. But when I traced the addresses, they all linked back to throwaway accounts. It was Paula's handwriting, just dressed in digital disguise. The harassment was working. My heart sank every time my phone buzzed. Walking outside felt like stepping onto a stage where everyone booed me before I even opened my mouth. And then, just when I thought the weight might crush me, she appeared. It was Sunday evening when I heard a soft knock at the door. Not the sharp, demanding knock I'd grown used to. This one was hesitant, almost apologetic. When I opened it, a middle-aged woman stood there, clutching a bottle of water like it was a peace offering. She had kind eyes, the kind that made you feel like maybe you weren't crazy after all. "My name's Sophie," she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid someone might see her. I live 3 blocks away. I wanted to say I'm sorry for what's happening. This isn't right. The relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. Finally, someone who saw through the smoke and mirrors. Finally, proof that I wasn't alone. She didn't stay long, just long enough to mutter a few words about how Paula's behavior had made a lot of people uncomfortable. But when she left, I found something in the empty water bottle she'd handed me, a folded scrap of paper. On it, a phone number and 6 words that stopped me cold. "Text me. Something's not right about HOA finances." I sat at my kitchen table staring at those words long into the night. My grandfather's papers were still piled around me, the musty smell of old receipts and property surveys thick in the air. Until now, I'd been trying to defend myself to prove I wasn't trespassing on land I owned. But Sophie's note suggested something bigger. Maybe this wasn't just about power. Maybe it was about money. The next week, Paula escalated again. Flyers, with my face, appeared on every corner, plastered with new accusations: unauthorized lake usage, uncooperative resident. The grainy photo of me on my dock was now framed like a mugshot, my address printed in bold underneath. Neighbors I'd never spoken to looked at me like I was a thief. Parents pulled their kids closer when I walked past. Paula had turned the neighborhood into a stage, and I was the villain in her production. By Wednesday, she took it further. She staged what she called a community documentation event on my dock. I watched from the kitchen window as about a dozen neighbors lined up with protest signs, Paula directing them like a director on set. "Smile like you're angry," she instructed one woman. "Hold the sign higher," she told a man. Cameras clicked, videos rolled. It was all theater, carefully choreographed for maximum impact. And then Thursday morning, she went live. I woke up to the sound of voices outside, grabbed my phone, and opened the neighborhood feed. There she was, Paula, standing on the sidewalk in front of my house, a portable microphone in hand, professional lights glaring against her sunglasses. She looked straight into the camera like a seasoned politician. "We have a serious problem in our community," she began, gesturing toward my house as if it were a crime scene. "One resident refuses to pay fair fees while stealing access to our shared lake." Her voice was smooth, practiced, dripping with false sincerity. She talked about community values and protecting property rights, her words perfectly tailored to sound reasonable to anyone who didn't know the details. And then she slipped while discussing the lake maintenance budget. Paula said, "I personally approve all spending for this lake." She caught herself instantly, correcting too. "I mean, the board collectively approves all spending." But I'd heard it. The mask had slipped. This wasn't about shared management. It was about her control. I grabbed my phone and recorded my own video. Simple, honest, just me standing on the dock with the lake stretching behind me. "I'm not sure why paying property taxes on land I inherited is controversial," I said. voice steady. But I'd rather talk with neighbors honestly than deal with staged demonstrations on my doorstep. I posted it online, half expecting it to be drowned out by Paula's theatrics, but within hours, comments started rolling in. People were asking real questions. Why would someone pay taxes on land they don't own? One asked. Has anyone actually seen the HOA paperwork? Wrote another. The tide wasn't turning fully, but for the first time, it was shifting. That night my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Check your email. It was Sophie. When I opened my inbox, my breath caught in my throat. Attached were photographs of Paula's personal calendar pages filled with lake inspections, emergency HOA meetings, and boundary surveys. The problem, none of those events had ever happened. I'd been home. I would have seen them. Even worse. The calendar listed maintenance expenses on dates when no work was performed. The amounts were large thousands of dollars, yet the lake looked the same as it always had. The implication was sickening. Paula wasn't just power hungry, she was funneling money somewhere it didn't belong. The next day she went door to door with a polished speech. Countering my video, she stayed 15 minutes at each house, convincing people with the same steady rhythm she'd used on camera. But this time, some doors closed early. Some neighbors looked skeptical. Cracks were forming in her armor. By Friday, she announced the big move, a public showdown, a boundary map examination to be held at the annual water festival that weekend. She promised to bring an HOA lawyer, official documents, and definitive proof of her authority. The gauntlet had been thrown as I stared at the flyer taped to my mailbox. I felt my stomach twist. Paula was turning a community celebration into a courtroom, and unless I was ready, she was going to bury me in front of everyone. Saturday dawned crisp and cool, the kind of autumn morning that normally would have smelled like promise wood smoke, damp leaves, a clean lake breeze drifting across the water. But for me, it felt like a walk toward execution. The water festival was supposed to be a cheerful event, kids with face paint, barbecue grills, smoking, boats lined up for races. Instead, Paula had twisted it into a stage for her courtroom drama. I arrived early, Sophie at my side, both of us carrying folders stuffed with evidence, property tax receipts, survey maps, copies of county records. The weight of them made my hands ache, though I knew the real burden wasn't the paperweight, was the possibility of standing in front of my entire neighborhood and losing anyway. 9 o'clock. The pavilion by the lake was packed. Families spread picnic blankets. Children chased each other with balloons, and in the center, Paula had constructed her empire. A folding table stacked with thick binders, a portable microphone, a PA system she must have rented for the occasion. She looked like a senator preparing for a press conference, every hair in place, every gesture precise. When she saw me, her smile was cold, triumphant. She had already won in her mind. Neighbors settled into rows of folding chairs, murmuring with the nervous energy of people about to watch a spectacle. Some waved at me hesitantly, as if unsure whether acknowledging me would mark them as traitors. Others openly glared, whispering into cupped hands. Paula seized the microphone and began, "Thank you all for coming. I know this was meant to be a day of fun and celebration, but unfortunately, one resident has forced us to confront a serious issue." She gestured toward me with a flourish, as though unveiling the villain in a courtroom drama. "This individual has refused to join our HOA, refused to pay fair fees, and continues to trespass on community property." Her voice swelled with righteous indignation. She flipped open one binder, showing stamped documents and official-looking signatures, all held high for the crowd to see but angled so I couldn't get a clear look. "These bylaws prove our authority. These records show the damage caused. By non-compliance, we cannot allow one person to jeopardize our entire community." The applause that followed wasn't universal, but it was loud enough to sting. My turn came too soon. My palms sweated as I fumbled with my folder, Sophie giving me a small nod of encouragement. I stepped forward, cleared my throat, and began. "I've lived here only 3 months, but my family has owned this property for decades. I pay taxes every year. My grandfather's records clearly show ownership of this dock and the lake surface around it. What's being claimed here today isn't Lit's intimidation." I held up county survey documents, pointing to the lines that marked my parcel. A few people leaned forward, squinting, whispering to each other. For a moment, I thought I saw doubt flicker across their faces. And then I made the mistake. Among the photos Sophie had given me were images of Paula's home calendar, the ones that revealed her fraudulent meetings and fake maintenance expenses. In my rush to prepare, I had forgotten to blur out the personal details in the background. Birthdays, family appointments, even a medical reminder were visible on the pages. Paula pounced. "Look at this," she cried, snatching the photo from my hand and holding it high. "This man broke into my private life. He's been stalking me, photographing my home, violating my privacy just to avoid paying his fair share." Her voice cracked perfectly between outrage and vulnerability, every note designed to win sympathy. The crowd gasped. A woman in the front row shook her head in disgust. Someone muttered, "That's crossing a line." "I didn't take those photos," I protested, panic rising in my throat. "They were given to me, but it didn't matter. The momentum was gone. Paula's face glowed with vindication. She spread her hands like a martyr. Is this who you want to trust? Someone willing to dig through my personal life to smear me with lies and stolen documents? I have nothing to hide. In fact, here, look at this. She pulled out another binder, flipping through neatly typed expense reports. Line after line of landscaping costs, contractor payments, legal consultations, all perfectly balanced, every dollar accounted for, whether they were real or fabricated. I couldn't prove in that moment they looked legitimate. Too legitimate. The whispers in the crowd shifted tone. Sympathy that had started to drift my way now flowed back to her. This all looks convincing. One man said aloud, he's just making things up. Privacy invasion. Another muttered, that's not how neighbors behave. My stomach hollowed out. Sophie's face paled beside me. For 20 minutes I had believed the truth might win, but in a single swing Paula had flipped the entire narrative, and then came the silence. 10 full seconds of it, stretching like an eternity. Paula had finished her performance. The crowd sat in judgment, weighing my worth, my honesty, my place among them. I could feel every stare burning into me, the weight of suspicion pressing harder than any legal verdict, and then applause scattered at first, then building. Applause for her poise, her professionalism, her supposed transparency. It felt like a funeral for my credibility. I stood frozen as the clapping echoed, Sophie gripping my arm like she could anchor me to the earth. Paula smiled at me, lips curving in triumph, eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of victory. In that moment, she had buried me. The festival carried on around us, children laughing, music playing, grills smoking. But wherever I walked, conversations hushed. Parents pulled their kids away. Neighbors I had once hoped might be allies now looked at me like a predator. Sophie whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't think. It's not your fault, I said, hollowly. But the truth was, the fault was mine. I had been careless. I had given Paula the weapon she needed, and she had wielded it with surgical precision that night. I sat in the dark at my kitchen table, staring at the pile of useless evidence in front of me. My hands shook. For the first time, fear outweighed anger. What if this never ended? What if every day in this house was surveillance, hostility, isolation? I drafted a text to Paula, an apology, a plea to make peace, to let it all go. My thumb hovered over the send button for nearly an hour. Then I deleted it, because Sophie was right. If I gave up, she'd do this to someone else, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't over yet. Sunday morning came heavy and gray, the kind of sky that presses down like a warning. My head pounded from lack of sleep, my chest hollow from humiliation. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of cold coffee, replaying the applause in my head, every clap echoing like a nail in my coffin. But then Sophie called. Her voice carried a sharpness I hadn't heard before, cutting through my fog. If you walk away now, she wins. She'll do this to someone else. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about whether one person can bully an entire neighborhood into submission. The words lit something in me, a spark I thought Paula had drowned at the festival. She was right. This wasn't about my pride anymore. It was about truth, about the lake, about the community my grandfather had trusted me to protect. That afternoon, I shifted gears. No more defense, no more apologies. From now on, I would build my case piece by piece, as methodically as Paula built her theater. If she wanted a war, I would give her one in my terms. I started small on Monday. I placed a sheet of paper on the porch coffee table, an old survey photocopy I doctored, with a single dot in the corner, faint enough that no one would notice unless they got close. It wasn't real evidence, just bait. By evening, Paula stormed up my driveway, waving her phone, shrieking about fraudulent documents and criminal forgery. I smiled inwardly. She had seen the dot, which meant she'd been snooping, which meant she was watching me closer than she ever admitted. The trap worked. Tuesday brought another escalation. Paula marched across my yard with a man she introduced grandly as her legal assistant. He handed me an envelope with all the gravity of a court summons. Inside was a letter on official-looking letterhead, brimming with legalese. It demanded I stop spreading misinformation and harassing community leadership, or face a gag order. But I knew enough to recognize the difference between real authority and theater. There were no stamps, no case numbers, nothing filed with the court. It was just another performance, another prop I refused to sign. Calmly, politely, and for the first time, I saw Paula crack. Her smile slipped into a snarl, her voice rising above the brittle mask she usually wore. You're making this harder than it has to be. All you have to do is pay your dues and stop causing problems. The anger in her eyes was raw, unfiltered. For the first time, she looked less like a leader and more like what she really was, desperate. That night, Sophie came by again. She carried a folder under her arm, and when she laid it on my table, my breath caught. Inside were spreadsheets, emails, and handwritten notes, records she'd been keeping quietly for months. They never balanced, she whispered, tapping a column of numbers. She collected more money than she ever reported. Look here, landscaping, legal fees, maintenance, none of it matches. And when I asked questions, she told me to keep quiet. The Toto stared back at me, over $25,000 in so-called community fees, but no contractors had ever been hired. No equipment purchased, no improvements made. The money was gone. Wednesday I turned from defense into preparation. I dug deeper into county records, pulling every survey map, every tax receipt, every deed. My grandfather's meticulous files became my arsenal. Each faded page, each notarized seal was a bullet against her lies. I bought a portable projector, tested it until the hum of its fan became background music. I practiced overlays of survey maps against the actual view of the lake through my windows, rehearsing how I would reveal them to a crowd. I set up my drone to capture aerial footage of the lake boundaries, clear lines showing exactly where my property ended and community space began. Every test flight, every projector run, every practice. Speech felt like armor sliding into place. Paula was a master of theater, but I was going to beat her with truth and spectacle of my own. Thursday evening, Sophie joined me for a final rehearsal. She scrolled through the spreadsheets, double-checking every number. "When the time comes, I'll stand up," she said. "I'll show them where the money went or didn't go. But you have to lead with the land. Show them you own what she's claiming. Show them she's been lying from the start." Her determination steadied me. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were allies. By Friday morning, the announcement went out: a final community meeting at the town hall. Paula framed it as a chance to, once and for all, settle the lake dispute through professional legal review. She promised to bring her lawyer, her documents, her witnesses, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid because I knew something Paula didn't. The lake was mine, the lies were hers, and I had the proof. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of gray skies that make everything feel heavier, as if even the clouds knew what was about to happen. By the time I pulled into the town hall parking lot, the place was already buzzing. Neighbors streamed through the double doors, carrying lawn chairs, clipboards, and expressions that said they weren't here for community spirit, they were here for blood. Inside, the room had been transformed into a courtroom without a judge. Folding chairs lined up in rows, a long table stretched across the front, microphones set up like it was a press conference, and there, in the middle of it all, was Paula. Perfect hair, pressed suit, binders stacked like trophies. She nodded to residents as they passed, shaking hands like a politician on election day. When she saw me enter with Sophie at my side, her smile sharpened. It wasn't a greeting, it was a warning. The room filled quickly, every seat taken, people standing along the walls. Paula tapped the microphone, her voice swelling with authority. "Thank you all for coming. Today we settle this matter once and for all. Our community cannot function when one resident refuses to follow the rules, refuses to pay fees, and continues to exploit resources that belong to everyone." She gestured grandly to the man beside her, a lawyer in a dark suit, briefcase gleaming, the embodiment of seriousness. "Our legal counsel will walk you through the statutes that make this clear." He stood, smoothing his tie. His tone was calm, deliberate, full of legal citations and county ordinances. For 15 minutes, he spoke of HOA rights, community authority, fee collection, and property access. The words sounded convincing, the kind of language that makes ordinary people nod even if they don't understand it. Around me, heads bobbed. Doubt crept back into the room, settling on my shoulders like a weight. But when he sat down, it was my turn. I walked slowly to the front, my folder in one hand, my other hand steady on the projector remote. The murmur of the crowd quieted. I set the projector on the table, angled it toward the wide windows that overlooked the lake, and pressed a button. Light flared. On the wall, perfectly aligned with the view of the water beyond, county survey maps glowed in sharp detail. Lines traced across the screen, clear as day, marking the boundaries of my property. And those lines stretched not just to the dock, not just a few feet into the water, but across the surface of the lake itself. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Neighbors leaned forward, comparing the projection with the view outside. The boundary buoys I'd placed weeks ago lined up exactly with the surveyed lines. As I said, my voice steady, isn't a claim. It isn't a theory. These are official records, filed with the county, showing what my grandfather left me. The dock, the shoreline, and the surface of the lake that Paula claims is hers to control. The silence was electric. I pressed another button, and drone footage filled the wall. Aerial shots of the lake, time-lapse, overlays showing the buoys, the shoreline, the survey markers. Every frame confirmed what the documents showed. "The truth was here all along," I said. "I've paid taxes on it for years. You've seen the receipts. This isn't community property. It's private land. And for months, Paula has tried to convince you otherwise." Whispers rose, sharp and questioning. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, flipping through his binder as if he could find something to erase what was burning into everyone's eyes. And then Sophie stood. Her voice cut through the noise, calm but carrying weight. "There's something else you all need to see." She lifted the folder she'd been guarding like a weapon. "I've been tracking HOA fee collections for 2 years. The numbers don't add up. Paula has been collecting thousands of dollars from families. Money that never went to contractors, never went to maintenance, never went anywhere but her pocket. She laid the spreadsheets on the table, her finger tracing columns of damning figures. $25,000 gone. No invoices. No receipts. No work done. The room erupted. Shouts of anger. Questions hurled like stones. Where's our money? You told us the lake needed repairs. What did you do with it, Paula? The lawyer paled, his lips pressing into a thin line. And then, without a word, he snapped his briefcase shut, stood, and walked out. The sound of the door slamming echoed like a gavel. It was the sound of abandonment. Even her own hired defender wouldn't stand by her lies. Paula tried to fight back. She slammed her hands on the table, voice shrill. You people don't understand. Running a community takes work. I did what I had to do to protect your property values, but the mask was gone. Her words dripped with contempt, with the bitterness of someone who had lost control. The neighbors weren't buying it anymore. You lied to us, shouted one man. You stole from us, cried another. You had us harass him while you pocketed our money. The fury built, a wave she couldn't stop. By the end of the meeting, the county attorney had been called. Legal papers were drafted on the spot. Paula was ordered to return every stolen dollar within 30 days. She was banned from serving on any HOA board for 5 years. A tax investigation loomed over her like a storm. And in front of everyone, she was forced to sign the documents, her signature shaky, her face pale, her empire collapsing with every stroke of the pen. The humiliation didn't stop there. Over the following weekend, under community supervision, Paula herself tore down the fake lake rules signs she had erected. She removed the unauthorized fences, the notices, the threats she had plastered across the neighborhood. Each sign she pulled up was a nail ripped out of the coffin she had built for others. And then came the video. In a twist of irony too perfect to script, Paula was required to record a public apology using the same neighborhood feed she'd once dominated. No lights, no makeup, no crowd. Just her, staring into the camera, forced to admit the truth, that she had lied about property rights, fabricated authority, and stolen from the people she claimed to represent. The video spread quickly, neighbors sharing it in group texts and laughing at the once untouchable queen brought low. But the best part wasn't her downfall. It was what came after. The community, freed from Paula's grip, built something new, a voluntary fund, transparent and democratic, run by rotating neighbors. No mandatory fees, no intimidation. Monthly reports open to anyone who wanted to see. Decisions made together, not dictated by one power-hungry woman. The money flowed, this time honestly. Docks repaired, safety equipment installed, a new playground by the shore. People contributed more than they ever had before because this time they trusted where it was going. Weeks later, I stood on my dock at sunset, the lake golden and calm, children splashing in the shallows while parents laughed on the shore. Sophie joined me, her smile soft but triumphant. You did it, she said. No, I corrected. We did it. The lake did it. The truth did it. I watched the ripples spread across the water, the same water my father once fished, my grandfather once cherished, the same water Paula tried to steal with lies and paperwork. At first I thought I was just protecting a dock, I said. Turns out I was protecting an entire community. This lake was always mine, but now it belongs to all of us. The wind stirred, carrying laughter, the smell of grilled food, the sound of freedom. And in that moment I knew we had taken back more than just property. We had taken back trust, because sometimes all it takes to expose a fraud is one stubborn voice refusing to stay silent. And if someone ever tells you what you can and can't do on your own dock, check the deed, bring receipts, and never underestimate the power of a lake that refuses to be stolen.